You've been there. I've been there. Hell, Shira's definitely been there. But this happens with every game that you start for the very first time. You start it up and everything feels new, fresh, open. You get to explore, you get to experiment with your character, you make some weird decisions along the way. You play super inefficiently and you're not caring because you're enjoying the process, you're having fun, you're discovering something new. You pick abilities because they sound cool, or you pick gear because it looks cool on your character, whatever that might be. You wander off, the critical path, you explore, you figure out things, you die, you learn, maybe you laugh it off because you're new to the game. Who cares, right? The game feels alive because you're still discovering what it wants from you, what you want from it, from the game. What are you looking to get out of this experience? But then, slowly, over time, without you realizing, things start to change. You maybe look something up, or you compare numbers on how you're doing DPS with somebody else. Or, God forbid, you follow a guide online that teaches you how to do an entire quest line. And without realizing it, you stop playing the game you were enjoying at the very beginning, and you start playing the game that somebody else is telling you it's optimal. Now, a little segue here. I'm not trying to say that optimization in all manners is wrong or that you shouldn't do it. It's a natural thing that we all do because the brain is just wired to try and be more efficient over time. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. This isn't a shot at people doing speedrun content or anything like that. This is more of a general analysis of what can happen to you when you stop focusing so much on the fun and you start focusing more on how you can min-max everything. This isn't a problem that's necessarily unique to any one genre. It happens across all sorts of games like MMOs or RPGs, but also roguelikes and strategy games. Even cozy games, believe it or not, can have that min-max experience. But players don't just enjoy games, they like solving them. They like kind of figuring things out and being better at them. The problem with a game being solved, though, is that the mystery starts to collapse. And what's left is the efficiency that you built. So the fastest build, the best route, the highest damage rotation, the optimal farming loop. And so the question stops being of what do I want to do today when I log into the game? And it kind of becomes on what should I do? What's the best thing that will occupy my time? And I think that ultimately takes away from the experience, especially in MMOs. But hear me out, okay? The tension between these two things is very simple, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable. Players want the freedom to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do, but they also want certainty. And the problem is you can't necessarily have both. We want to experiment, but we also want the reassurance that we're not wasting our time while doing this experimentation, right? Games offer infinite choices, but players quickly start narrowing them down, searching for the correct way to play, making tier lists. We can't help ourselves. Optimization feels like it's a responsible thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. It feels respectful of the limited time we play, especially as you get older and you have work and you have family and you have things to do and you can't dedicate as much time to the game. And yet, I feel that it often strips away the very thing that made the experience enjoyable in the first place. Now, MMOs make this more visible than any other genre, in my opinion, because in theory, these are worlds that are built for long-term play. You're supposed to inhabit the world that you're in. Social experimentation, people that you're meeting, diverse roles that complement each other, things that happen spontaneously. But in practice, most MMO players end up kind of just funneled into a small set of viable builds and activities and things they should do and raids they should run and levels they should reach. And getting max level, doing this thing, getting this achievement. Entire classes or specs are labeled dead on arrival because they don't perform well on a spreadsheet or a DPS parser. It's kind of strange. Players re-roll not because they actually dislike the character that they're playing, but because the community has decided that something else is actually better. So if they're not playing that other thing, they're wasting their time. So the game may allow freedom, but the meta slowly punishes that freedom. Roguelikes, I think, are another clear example. And by the way, I know I haven't made a roguelike suggestion in quite a while. I'll get to it, I promise. I know some of you came for that and not for MMORPGs. Don't worry, we got some on the way. But these games are often praised for their replayability, which is something I focused on the 2 games I suggested before, and also the random element. But once players learn which upgrades are the strongest and which strategies are the safest, runs start to kind of blur together. Right? Instead of adapting creatively to what the game is trying to give you, players really reset the runs that don't feel optimal in conditions. The moment-to-moment tension remains, but the sense of discovery kind of fades away. And I saw this reflected in my comments. I had people telling me like, oh, this game is great, but if you really want to get to beating the end resolution, you have to run these builds. And it's like, no, you don't. The whole process of enjoying that replayability in the roguelite is that you try, you experiment, you do different stuff, you do wacky builds. That's the fun. You're missing out on the fun because you just want to finish the thing, you want to complete it, and that's not how it works. I think that problem becomes clear when the player isn't reacting anymore. They're just executing a game plan. Even single player RPGs aren't immune to this. Players will spend hours, and I mean hours, researching the best builds, whether it be on YouTube or Reddit or forums, before they're even finished the opening area, before they've even launched the game. They'll respec constantly to match online advice, worried that they're choosing the wrong talent now, worried that choosing the wrong talent now will ruin the end game for them later. Instead of inhabiting a character, living in a world, discovering, they're managing it like it's a project. The role-playing becomes secondary to how you're performing in that particular game. And I want to reiterate again, the important thing here is that this behavior isn't irrational. Games increasingly reward optimization. So you might have like progression systems that are often tuned around efficiency. When time-gated systems or daily tasks or long grinds are involved, players sometimes feel that pressure to play quote-unquote correctly. The game may not explicitly demand optimization, but you are somewhat incentivized to do it. One thing that comes to mind is there's server tick rates, and in EverQuest, you can do this in Monsters Memories too. There's this thing where, you know, if you sit at the right time or you do this thing at the right time, the server will tick and then you'll get the most benefit out of it. So if you really want to min-max, you can do that. But then you can also not do that and enjoy your playtime. The thing is that over time, players internalize the idea that playing suboptimally is a mistake. But optimization doesn't just come from systems. It's also from culture, from the way we think, from the way our brains work. Modern games exist alongside wikis and, like I said, tier lists and content creators that are making stuff on the game, damage calculators, community rankings, forums, Discord servers, you name it. Information is so abundant and so immediate that we can't help ourselves. The moment a new game launches, it's already being dissected. Hell, we have guides and things up before the game even comes out. Secrets don't stay secret ever. Experiments don't really stay personal because they're shared across the world, globally, on the internet. There's also a lot of comfort in shared knowledge, but I think there's a cost. And when the best way to play is known on day one, before day one, the space for personal discovery really shrinks. This is why I think it's also very important that games allow for like what's called meme builds or non-meta builds, so that you can actually do something fun, and that's not necessarily the way that everybody's playing, but it's unique and it's your way and it works. The broader truth though is that players don't optimize because they hate fun. Everybody's playing a game because they're trying to have fun in one way or another, and fun ultimately is subjective. But they optimize because they care. They want to feel like they're competent. They want to belong. They want to avoid having regret later. So optimization turns out to be often a response to anxiety about time, about failing, about falling behind. When games frame progress as something you can lose or delay by playing wrong, players sometimes respond by minimizing risk. Fun becomes something you earn after efficiency rather than something embedded in the process. And like I talked about previously, There's a psychological shift that happens when players start optimizing. The game stops being an experience and it kind of becomes a task that you're doing. Success is measured externally, numbers, rankings, completion, percentages, achievements, rather than internally through enjoyment, surprise, discovery, exploration. When progress is visible and comparable, players naturally gravitate towards maximizing it, which is why I'm making it clear that I'm not saying this is players' fault. It's just a natural human instinct. I'm just pointing out that the irony is that the more players succeed by these metrics, the less engaged they often feel. This creates a feedback loop. Developers see players optimizing, so they design systems with that behavior in mind. They balance around metas, they assume guide usage, they tune up difficulty expecting optimal play. Think of World of Warcraft Mythic Plus. Players then feel even more pressured to optimize because the game increasingly assumes that they will optimize. What began as a choice slowly becomes the norm, the expectation, the thing that you have to do. None of this means optimization, though, like I said, is inherently bad. Many players genuinely enjoy mastery of the one thing that they're doing. They enjoy theory crafting builds. They enjoy pushing systems to their limits, and I think that's fine. That's completely fine. The problem, I think, arises when the optimization becomes the default mode of play for everybody as a blanket, rather than something self-selected for one particular individual. When efficiency crowds out curiosity, discovery, and it replaces experimentation, something essential is lost, which is something we've talked about across a bunch of videos on this channel. I think games have become the most memorable, think of that word, when players don't know what they're doing yet. When they make the strange choices, when they adapt in an imperfect way, when they learn through friction, a word I love using in every single video. These moments rarely happen at peak efficiency. They happen in the gaps between that play, when the player is not really sure of what they're doing, when they're still kind of guessing and fumbling about, when they're still willing to fail because they're discovering something new, they're experimenting, they're trying something out. Optimization really shortens that phase of enjoyment, of discovery, of fun. It gets you to the end faster, sure, you might get to max level a lot quicker, but often at the cost of experiencing the journey. And if there's one thing I've learned playing games for such a long time, and especially playing MMOs, most of the enjoyment, my friends, believe it or not, and this is something that might be a shock to new MMO players in 2026, most of the enjoyment comes from the journey, not the end result, not the destination. How many games have you seen where people try and play and they finish, they get to max level in like 2 weeks, and then they're doing the end game, and then they're done, and then they're like, why is there no more content? There's no MMO, no matter how well designed, how much content they do ahead of time, that's going to be able to keep up with the demands of a player base that's just out there to consume, and progress as fast as they can without enjoying the process. So, perhaps the real question isn't really why players optimize the fun out of games. I tricked you there, huh? But why do they feel so compelled to do so in many games? Why do we frame progress as something fragile, something that can be wasted if you don't play it correctly, right? Why is curiosity rarely protected and inefficiency rarely forgiven? Because ultimately, the most fun players ever have in games usually happens before the guides, before the metas, before the spreadsheets come about. It happens when the game is still a question rather than a solved puzzle. And once everything is optimized, the only thing left to optimize is whether logging in still feels like it's a worth thing for you. That's just the way I feel. Again, nothing wrong if that's the way you like to play. This is not a shout out against anybody in particular. I just think I should put that out there because we kind of forgot that a lot of these MMOs started as an adaptation of the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing experience, or whatever tabletop role-playing game you want to say. And those games were, sure, you would level up and you would get gear and all this stuff, but you were not often thinking about, oh, I have to do this particular mathematical move and then the chances of my dice. Like, you're having fun, you're role playing a character, you're embodying some mythical creature in a fantasy game, you know, you're interacting with NPCs. That was the goal of those original MMOs, and I think that's what's been lost over time. And we've just come up with games where the ultimate goal is to just be the top DPS parser in a raid, filling our screen with all UI elements that make the game even barely bissable. And that's it. That's all we have. But of course, I'd love to hear your comments down below. Let me know how wrong or right I am. Either way, it's appreciated. My name is Squats. You can do all the YouTube things. It really helps us out. Maybe make a living being a goblin. I'll see you guys in the next one. Squats.